So I'd like it to get.
Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Unleashed with me, Scarlett Johnson, presented by Moms for Liberty. And we're going to talk about a breaking story that happened while I was in DC this week. It was completely unexpected. I was like sitting in the press room, and then I heard rumor that there's going to be this DOJ press conference with the FBI Director Kash Patel and the acting DOJ. I don't know his name exactly, but it was news that I was welcome to hear. It was about the Southern Poverty Law Center. The breaking news that the Southern Poverty Law Center faces a major scandal after the grand jury came back with an indictment of 11 counts. And I'm going to go through all of that, but first I want to say welcome to my guest, Meg Brock. Meg, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Federal grand jury in Montgomery, Alabama, indicted the SPLC on 11 accounts. These charges include wire fraud, bank fraud, false statements to a federally insured bank, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. The SPLC created a fiction, they funded it, they built an illusion, one that eager, willing politicians and members of the mainstream media embraced because it affirmed their own prejudices, unwilling to accept that the ideas that they had been championing, isolating kids during COVID, forcing masks, dehumanizing children, teaching K through 12 education through the lens of critical race theory and gender ideology, and perpetuating this narrative that America is this horribly racist country, deeply rooted in white supremacy. In fact, I think as it turns out, they couldn't find instances of institutional white supremacy, so they had to invent them with these false flag operations. We've been saying this for years, Meg. Finally, there's proof. So I'm glad to hear it, but I want to see justice. What are your thoughts about this indictment, considering your background? You could talk a little bit about that. You're from Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and you certainly received a lot of backlash from groups like SPLC and what their rhetoric does to incite, I think, violence towards moms like us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, I've been thinking a lot since this came out about the Moms for Liberty Summit that happened in Philadelphia in June 2023. And that was just, I think it was almost exactly 3 weeks after the SPLC had labeled Moms for Liberty an alleged hate group. But I mean, if you go back and read their report, it really was an attack on all parental rights, the whole parental rights movement. So really any parent like you and I who were at school board meetings, questioning questioning code mitigation, calling for schools to reopen, saying we don't want children to learn at school that Johnny can become Jane, just things that are very basic. And I'll say too, with the COVID, we were right. I mean, all the evidence shows that the prolonged school closures, the masks have had a serious implications, very negative implications for students during that time. That are we we're never going to really fully know the harms that were done, but that was an attack on all of us. I mean, I think going back to thinking that we were called domestic terrorists, and then this was kind of like the next step. So yeah, there was so much hate, so much that it's hard to even believe it was real in America, simply for being a parent who spoke up for your convictions during school board meetings.
So I've been going through my notes, my social media, all of my pictures, and it's been a trip down memory lane. I think I forgot, or I wanted to forget these kind of dark times. So going back to the spring of 2023, I found an old video where Representative Ilhan Omar called Moms for Liberty, moms for bigotry, and moms for oppression, and used all sorts of language. And she also referenced basically the whole parental rights movement. And in a hearing with Secretary Cardona, the former Secretary of Education under Biden, she basically asked him, "What are you doing to stop these parents? What are you doing to limit their influence? How are you using the force of federal government to come down hard on these white supremacists?" She said that in May of 2023. Less than a month later, the SPLC put Moms for Liberty on its hate map, designated us as a domestic terrorist organization, an anti-government group alongside Antifa, the KKK, very radical, extreme groups. We are just moms that went to school board meetings. We gave some fiery speeches, but there was no violence. There was no violent rhetoric. It was just moms trying to get involved, and successfully so, and getting involved in school board races and winning. I don't think it's a coincidence that day on Capitol in May, that moms were under fire, and that representatives like the squad were basically signaling to the federal government, what are you going to do to stop them? And then what do you know? We are designated as a domestic terrorist organization, which, in my opinion, opens the door for the federal government to start to surveil us and watch us. And it gives permission for so many radicals and, frankly, not mentally well people to feel it's their duty to take us out, to oppose us. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think back to, again, like thinking about the event that at the Moms for Liberty Summit at the Museum of the American Revolution, and how there was weeks of protests. There were a whole coalition of Pennsylvania state senators trying to get the event canceled, which is so ironic given that this was in Philadelphia, like literally the birthplace of liberty, democracy, freedom. You had politicians trying to get a group of moms canceled. And part of their reason was they said, oh, the SPLC has labeled them a hate group. They're, these extremists, and they were pressuring the museum to not have the event. And so I remember there was just a mob of people. We all had to have essentially a police escort to even enter the event. And you think about how crazy it is that a group of parents, mostly moms, very normal everyday moms, had to have a police escort to basically enter a cocktail hour. When you think about the implications of that, and I think about some of the horrible political violence we've seen escalating around the country in the past 18 months. I mean, I think back to that, I think we're very, very lucky that no one got hurt. I know there were arrests. I know there was a lot of harassment. I know that there were some kind of scary, even you have a video of when we were going out to dinner and your Uber is like getting like surrounded by like angry protesters. I mean, there was some tense moments that really, man, it's really crazy to think that in America, you could be demonized like that for simply sharing your beliefs that really are not radical at all.
So when I think about when we arrived Philadelphia, we had to have a meeting. We were told to not leave the hotel, that
Mm,
basically it wasn't safe, and the police could not protect us beyond the minute we left the perimeter of the hotel. We were on our own. They told us to not wear any gear signifying that we were with Moms for Liberty. Don't wear even American flags. Don't wear
mm,
anything that was patriotic. It was shocking that
mm,
you needed to not look like you were a supporter of Trump or Moms for Liberty, or you loved America, that you had to be inconspicuous. But finally, one night, because Pennsylvania's your hometown, you wanted to show us around a little bit, take us out to eat. We thought, okay, let's get some Ubers and let's go to a restaurant. Maybe we could sneak out the back door. Um, Unfortunately, they discovered us and they swarmed us. And it was one of the most uncomfortable situations I've ever been in. The way that they surrounded us as we walked to the Uber, the way they surrounded the Uber,
mm,
they were trying to stop it from moving. They were just screaming and yelling and saying such hateful things, horrible things. They trying to provoke us, trying to get us to even just to touch them, I think, because that could provoke some kind of action. And
mm,
it was very shocking for me, very shaken up by it, and
mm,
we weren't the only group. There were other groups where if they simply just wanted to um, just go see Philadelphia, this historic city, leave their hotel, that they had surrounded all of the different exits, and they
mm,
were watching and monitoring and coming after us. And I believe that was directly because SPLC put this target on our back and gave
mhm,
permission for these radicals to basically just make our lives miserable, to try to push us so far that we just want to walk away. We just want to be done. The pain is too much. What do you think the purpose is of the kind of tactics that they use, these more revolutionary tactics?
Well, I mean, I think that parents being involved in school boards and local politics is effective. I mean, I think about what just happened in Virginia, and you think in 2021, the Republicans won the gubernatorial race, and that was a lot of that was credited in part to parents because it was kind of the peak of the COVID era, and all these moms and dads were totally pissed off that their kids were either not in school or still having to wear a mask, and they'd had enough, and so they really gathered around uh, you know, more local and state elections, and it had a huge impact. I saw that in my own county in 2021 when parents all we had 13 different school districts in Bucks County, and in every district there were these grassroots groups that were mostly totally separate from the GOP, just parents who were upset.
Yes.
They were Republicans, Democrats, and libertarians, like all working together to try and elect school board members who would stop all the COVID craziness. And ultimately, what that did is it had an impact, and it drove up the countywide totals to where the Republicans won all the county elections that they had lost 2 years earlier. And so when I think that when activists and progressive activists saw how impactful that was, and frankly, I think it's the most American thing ever. First, I mean, that America really needs people to care. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't really care or care enough to even vote unless something is really pressing into them personally. But I think there was every reason for progressives to want to stamp out that fire because it was effective and it was growing and it was really changing, and it continues to influence. But I think we really saw it really changing how politics were working.
Uh, I think you said something really important, because I think back to that time that this was not political. This wasn't Republican or Democrat. You weren't kind of doing a litmus test. When parents got together, they just came together as parents, as concerned citizens. We didn't say, "Hey, raise your hand if you're Republican, if you're not, get out of here," or vice versa. And this movement it just caught fire because it wasn't labeled.
Mhm.
It was just, we were all in this collective moment together, and it was so successful. The school board races winning, I know in my own area, candidates were like beating out school board presidents, like two to
Mhm.
one. It
Mhm.
was just such I mean, Glenn Youngkin was swept in during this time, and
Mhm.
he was not predicted to win. And then, of course, the famous statement uh,
Mhm.
was made in the one of the gubernatorial debates, and boom, Glenn Youngkin had his moment. And there
Mhm.
were articles called "The Parent Revolution," and I think the success there, that really scared the left and it scared the authoritarians, and so they needed to come in and
Mhm.
break apart the unity. And what better way to do it than to have groups like SPLC
Mhm.
label, say, "Hey, you don't want to
Mhm.
be with those people; those are white supremacists over there."
Right.
And
Mhm.
by putting these labels on, that gave permission for the media to run with it, and boy, they sure did.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's a very dehumanizing label. And I think I mentioned earlier, I was just reading that report that they really took care to make sure they include the entire parental rights movement. Like they were speaking about Moms for Liberty, but they were speaking broadly about parents that were involved in school board meetings and weren't progressive. And I mean, I think that we both saw at the local level the kind of hate that spurred, and it's really disturbing. I mean, I think about school board candidates school board directors who were, I mean, mocked incessantly. Some received death threats. I mean, just absolutely horrible things. And it's so sad because, particularly with school boards, they are supposed to be about education and not about politics. And so I really think that pushing this perception of extremism when you're having I mean, what really we know, like, for example, the transgender issue is an 80-20 issue. Like, if you believe that 5-year-olds should be learning that they can change their sex, like, you're the person who's actually extreme. And yet the
Yes.
SPLC labeled parents like you and I who have said, no, we should not be teaching this dangerous ideology to children, that we were extreme and hateful bigots, fascists for doing that, when really the numbers tell the story. So I think you're absolutely right. It allowed a dehumanizing narrative to really attack any parent who was speaking up on issues that most Americans actually do agree on.
I It's to this day sometimes, but back then in particular, I felt like I was in the upside down. And my husband, like, having to relive some of this, my husband's like, I just can't even go there, because
Mhm.
to pick up the local news, like the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel in my area, and see articles written about your wife, your mom, your sister, your aunt, her face, and here's Scarlett Johnson running for school board. Oh, and by the way, she's a white supremacist, she's a
Mhm.
bigot, she's a racist, transphobe, linked to an organization that has been labeled by SPLC a domestic terrorist organization. That What I just said there, that was the tagline by every legacy media source for the last 3 years. Um,
Mhm.
by far the qualifier. And
Mhm.
it angered me every time, because I'm like, look around. Do you need, when you come to talk to members of Moms for Lead, when you come to an event, do you need security? um, if it was just us, no. Like, we aren't violent. We do not speak violent rhetoric. Believe me, if we did, you'd know it. But on the other side, you it's right there for you to see. Every
Mhm.
event, surrounded. I mean, there was one event in Wauwatosa school board meeting where uh, me and 5 other moms and a grandfather came to speak at the school board meeting to support the vast majority of parents that were opposing comprehensive sexuality education in their
Mhm.
schools. Um, and we won't go down that route we have before, but it's just a vile curriculum that has nothing to do with education and everything about indoctrinating and sexualizing very young kids. So
Mhm.
in this community, which was a blue community, the overwhelming number of voters opposed this. They didn't want it. The district put out one of their little polls. They didn't, they did not get the numbers they wanted. So they did it again. And they basically had to keep editing out the poll till they got a number that was presentable. because the public didn't want what they were serving. And we were surrounded by 300 activists that one of them grabbed me by the neck. We had to have a police escort into the school board meeting where these activists blocked our entry. And when we asked the police, could you please remove them? They said no. So this was our life. This was our life for years until President Trump was elected. This is just what we went through. And yet we were called the extremists. And it's just the upside down that narrative was allowed to persist. And to this day, there's not been a reckoning. There needs to be a reckoning. I was happy to see the CBS News accurately portraying what is happening and the gravity of the indictment against SPLC. But frankly, it's crickets everywhere else. Or they say SPLC was indicted for paying off informants, just like the FBI pays off informants. It's like, no, these things are the same. So you're in the media. You work for the Daily Wire. Now, of course, these are good guys. But why? Why is the media perpetuating this fiction? Why are they allowing these very radical people to intimidate us and even them?
Well, I think we know that most of the majority of legacy media is captured and has a huge bias to the left. I mean, you talked about local journalism. I mean, I remember that being a big thing for me as well, of having these local newspapers constantly smearing you or covering all of these stories in a very one-sided way. So, I mean, I don't really think it's that surprising. I think that's probably what we would expect at this point. But I think narrative is a really powerful tool that people use. And I think the average person isn't necessarily paying attention to all these issues, might not even know what the SPLC is, but they've probably heard that Moms for Liberty is a hate group, right? They've probably heard that. And so I think it is really important to kind of keep peeling the curtain back and really showing where these ideas come from and giving people an alternative perspective that maybe they're not getting from traditional legacy sources.
You're an investigative journalist. Just looking at these initial grand jury indictments, do you think that there's more? Do you think where there's smoke, there's fire? Do you think the SPLC acted alone? It's the only organization doing this sort of thing. Do you think that there are some politicians that were aware of perhaps what they were doing? Do you think that there's going to be more investigation, that we're going to learn more?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in the legal field, so I don't really know in terms of what will happen, but I do think with human nature, I mean, we know that people, politics, power, it's all corrupts people, and there's a lot of corruption. So I think that I'm sure as this investigation continues, we're going to learn a lot more, and I hope we learn more. I hope we really are able to get full transparency and to see what happened, who, what, where, whens, so we can be more informed as the public and have a reckoning of how these lies and these actions damage real people. I think that's the part that normally is really missing in a lot of this, is that you think of how it really damaged and caused real harm to so many parents on the ground who don't have the money to hire a security team, right? Like, you're talking about walking into a school board meeting full of angry people that hate you and would love to see you harmed. I mean, essentially, it's a scary feeling. It's very unsettling. And I think it takes a lot of courage to continue just making sure you use your right as an American to share your opinion, to share your voice, to engage with your community. But yeah, I think that there's probably so many stories of people who've been really harmed throughout the country by these labels.
So I'm very excited to read your article when it comes out. Before we go, I did want to talk about the article that you have that's just been released. It's The Quiet Suburban Shift, Turning Safe Communities into Radical Ground. And I think that article, that article tells you how we got here. Because how did we get to 2020, 2021, 22, 23, you go back in time just a little bit and you lay the groundwork. How did we get here? how did common sense lose in the suburbs? How did the suburban schools even get affected by what was happening in city schools? Can you tell us a little bit about your article and why you felt compelled to write it?
Yeah, so I'm from Bucks County, which is right outside of Philadelphia, and Bucks County's been in national news a lot over the past 2 years, but most recently it was because the two teens who are charged with the ISIS-inspired or attempted terrorist attack in New York City were both from Bucks County. They were both from one was from these about half a mile away from where my husband and I bought our first house. The other one was 10 minutes away from where I grew up. So this hit really close to home for me. And I saw living there this real transformation in the suburbs that happened over the past decade. And so I went back and did some digging into the numbers. There were as many as 60,000 people a year leaving Philadelphia in the 2010s. Research suggested that a lot of them were parents, and they were leaving because they're of the failing schools. We know how the blue cities across the country, their schools are just abysmal. I mean, it's
Yes.
it's embarrassing. Like, of course, any parent who could not put their kids in those schools is going to want to take that chance. And then you have the crime issue where, I mean, I was reading through this Pew report, and it was just talking about people were like, yeah, I don't really want to worry about someone getting shot down my street when I have kids. And you're like, yeah, of course you don't. But I think what happened is people might have felt the effects of long-term progressive policies and how they failed to keep their community strong and safe. However, not everyone can recognize that if you continue to vote for the same things, then you're just going to have the same problems in your new home. And I think that's really what happened was a lot of people were fleeing the cities. The cities of populations have been kept up or slowly increased because of illegal immigration. I mean, there was a piece that was recently written that was expressing concerns that Philadelphia is not going to have like enough of a population growth or enough workers because of Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration. And I mean, these are things people are saying out loud. So you think so the cities are just kind of been conquered territory for progressive Democrats. They won, and now you have voters shifting out to the suburbs with progressive voting beliefs. And then you have, I know, in Bucks, I mean, a lot of the Philadelphia Democrats were coming out to the suburbs to campaign or to raise money for suburban political candidates. And so I really see it as like the Democrats just trying to strategically enlarge their territory. And then you see how that can have implications even at the federal level. And I, in my piece, talked
Yes.
about how our county commissioners in Bucks, so Bucks County, the Democrats won in the end of 2019 for the first time in over 40 years. It took control of the county by 664 votes, which there were over 450,000 voters in the election. So that is a slimmest of margins. And in 2024, they actually voted to violate established election law in Pennsylvania, and it was a huge news story. If you remember back to November
Yes.
2024, the Pennsylvania commissioners, those are my people, those are my commissioners who sued me 5 times, were viral for like 2 weeks. And so that is just an example of, like, you think about, I think a lot of times the conservative movement kind of leaves local people who are fighting these wars, like you're saying, at school boards behind. But I think it's a real miscalculation, because you lose those elections. Well, you lose like the people who are running elections. You lose schools, which means like you lose what's being pumped into the minds of the future. You know, I mean, the local elections can have so many consequences that people don't really think about. So yeah, it
I
was
have so
definitely a
many thoughts.
trip down memory lane for me to write that down my
Yes.
personal trauma.
I have so
Yeah.
many thoughts with what you said. First of all, lots of times conservatives, Republicans talk about ROI, return on investment. The return on investment when you invest into local elections is high. If
Mhm.
you put some money, talent, and effort into these local elections, if you find good candidates and then support them and help them, give them the resources, training they need, but also provide them with enough funds and campaign staff to actually run a good campaign. And they're getting more and more expensive. But back before COVID, I mean, a very small amount of money would go a long way. The
Mhm.
Democrats, and I have, since reading your article, I have actually done my own digging, and I started to find policy papers, um, scholarly journals, and books, things written by very smart strategists in the Democrat Party. They were written, you know, in the Obama era, and
Mhm.
kind of mapped out a plan. That plan was to invest in local suburban elections.
Mhm.
That by doing so, like this was uncharted territory.
Mhm.
Republicans tended to have control over these areas because they
Mhm.
were the voters that always showed up.
Mhm.
They're educated, they're in suburban areas, they show up rain or shine, they vote on election day. Democrats had voters kind of that, there's been a little bit of a switch. They have the voters that um, show up for big things, not a lot of small things. So
Mhm.
they had a strategy and they invested. They built a machine. We run campaigns. They think
Mhm.
way farther ahead than that. They
Mhm.
build machinery, and they really infiltrated institutions.
Mhm.
We are trying to catch up, but unfortunately, it's still a blind spot for us. We do not invest in local elections. We don't invest enough in state elections. And when we have power, we don't use it. We do not
Mhm.
use it the way that the Democrats have now. I'm not saying that we should do the illegal and underhanded tactics that they have done,
Mhm.
but we should be looking to Ron DeSantis as an example of what
Mhm.
you do when you have institutional power. You use it. You do not let them, you don't let their name calling get to you. If
Mhm.
you have Republicans that are kind of sold out, you primary them, and you keep this agenda going, and you keep building, and you really dig in and get this institutional power back, wrestle it
Mhm.
back. We're still coming to grips with these concepts. I don't know how long it's going to take, and I don't know how bad it's going to have to get before there is a come to Jesus moment in the conservative movement. But I sure hope it's coming soon.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think with it was interesting, like, in 2019 in Bucks, the Democrats won, but then with the parental rights movement, which was totally grassroots, in 2021, the Republicans won, and then it shifted back in 2023 when it was just local elections because, I mean, I know my experience with the local, GOPs are that they, in the suburbs were a lot more social club and kinda aging boomer than they were, like, really, like, ready for the fight and, like you're saying, the strategy that was coming from the Democrats. And so Bucks lost in 2023, and then there was a whole influx of national attention in Pennsylvania in 2024. So Trump took Bucks in 2024, and then the Democrats swept the county again in 2025. So it just is, I don't know, Bucks is such a fascinating place. Like I was not engaged in politics before or cultural issues before uh COVID, so I never really paid attention to it. But now I'm like, wow, I really lived through something like a place that's quite fascinating in terms of the swings and really what's happening across America. So I think they're definitely things worth thinking about and paying attention to.
Yeah, I think conservatives went, I think they're now coming out of this influencer moment where they you know what, Trump won. It was a miracle. It was awesome, amazing. I cried. I was a surrogate for Trump. Amazing. And I think the fact that in new media that conservatives had this power for once was intoxicating. But I think now we have to govern, and we have to think about building. And I think there are many that just want to keep reliving the win of November 2024, and how great it was in the beginning of 2025. They just want to keep reliving that. and they need to wake up and smell the Marxism, because it's coming, it's
Mm-hmm.
here, and
Mm-hmm.
if we keep hiding out in an echo chamber, patting ourselves on the back, then we're missing the whole thing. We're missing what's really happening. And so and now we see influencer infighting and all of this garbage. So while I appreciate everyone watching this show, I think people need to watch a lot less, and they need to be engaging more, and they need to be touching grass and be out in their community and aware of what's happening in their community and still fighting for their community. That's how we won. We
Mm-hmm.
won because Trump's messaging and his campaign was brilliant, and it was ever present. He campaigned so hard, harder than anyone harder than any politician I've seen in my lifetime. But you don't stop after that win. You have to keep going. You have to keep winning on ideas, and you can't get trapped in the echo chamber. And so I think that's my message. What is yours as we come to an end?
I mean, I've been researching the gender issue for the past 3 years, and I would just tell parents that to stay on guard. And why do things like school board elections matter so much? Well, I mean, I think the gender issue is a huge one, because I see the two main entry points for children into this psychosis being the internet and apps and schools. And so, I mean, I think a lot of people, when Trump won, and I think the Trump administration has taken really amazing steps to protect kids and children from gender ideology, but every single one is being fought in court, and there are a lot of activist judges who are not ruling in favor. And the other thing is that, a lot of the things that have happened are really only as good as this presidency. So until there's
Mhm.
laws passed that this could essentially all be erased, as soon as if a new Democrat president was elected and wrote a whole different set of executive orders saying, actually, gender identity is real, and if you misgender someone, it's a hate crime. You're going to go back on the SPLC's hate map. I mean,
Yes,
so I
going to be vindicated somehow with
yes.
like radical far left. Yes, yes, that's
So
why
I think that's why, in terms of what you're saying with real change and really, Mom's Liberty is all about schools. Why schools? I think they're so important. There's still a lot of work to be done. And I'm just talking about the issue of gender ideology. I mean, there's still so much to be done, and to protect kids and families. So I think that
yes,
the best way we can do that is just being engaged, being good
yes.
moms, good wives, good friends, good aunts, sisters, members of our
Mhm.
community, remembering like that's what real life is, and that's really where you find the joy in life. And I think if you don't have that joy, it's kind of hard to stay engaged with these issues. So I think, to your point, it's really important for people to find that balance in their lives.
Yes, we've got to stay engaged locally, stay vigilant, stay on top of your school board, find candidates, run for school board, collect the evidence when your school board or your state or a government institution is violating Title IX, violating federal law, violating civil rights by teaching or having a policy or a program that is seeped in critical race theory, meaning DEI, actually racist. So that's our job. We do that. And then we make sure we get this information to the federal government so that they can do their job, which is launch Title IX investigations, to withhold funding when schools are not in compliance. And exactly what happened on Tuesday, that is in the federal government's lane. They need to continue to go hard on the SPLC and dig up all that they can, expose what they did, and anyone affiliated with them needs to be exposed as well, because this is our shot. This is our chance to try to root out some of this corruption, this virus, this cancer that has just taken hold of American institutions. So while there's many things the federal government can't do as far locally and school boards and what's happening with grassroots activists, this they can do. They can provide us justice for what happened to us, and they could protect us in the future from something like this ever happening again. And it is incumbent upon them to work very hard and very vigilantly to get justice for all of us who were harmed in this space, because ultimately it is our children that are harmed when we can't protect them. So I don't think I could end it any other way than that.
That's great. No, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on, and I can't wait to read your next article. I encourage everyone to follow Meg Brock. I will have all of her information in the comments, and follow Daily Wire. They're doing great work, and you also will post the video that you were live speaking about your article. So I'm glad that you're now getting involved in new media.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you, Scarlett. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Meg. Bye.
Bye.
Great.